I didn't expect a lawn color to become a countdown clock, but that's how it started. The weekend inspection loomed, the heat shimmered off the sidewalks, and a $1,200 fine hung in the air like static. In our desert suburb, water was rationed, pallets were regulated, and apparently the color green had a narrow, enforceable definition. I learned that definition the hard way, in the kind of slow-burn homeowners association drama that doesn't explode at once but tightens, day by day, until something gives. The neighborhood looked calm from a distance. Tan stucco homes, gravel yards, a few stubborn lawns clinging to life under the sun. Sprinklers clicked on at permitted hours. Birds hopped between Palo Verde trees, and the wind carried grit across the asphalt with a dry hiss. That calm hid a rule book thick enough to bruise a toe, and a committee that treated color charts like law. I had moved here for quiet, for predictability, for the promise that rules would keep chaos out. Instead, I found myself in an HOA nightmare measured in shades of green. I wasn't reckless. I followed the water schedule. I replaced dead patches with drought-tolerant turf blends. I kept receipts. But I also believed common sense mattered. That belief lasted until the notice arrived, printed on stiff paper and slid under my door, warning me that my lawn was out of compliance due to hue variance. The phrasing was clinical, almost polite. The threat wasn't. Inspection scheduled before the weekend. Fine pending. Cure period minimal. The heat pressed down as I read it again, the paper warm against my fingers. Somewhere down the street, a leaf blower whined and then cut out. I felt watched, measured, and suddenly very visible. Background helps explain how a neighborhood turns into a theater of petty enforcement. Our association governed a gated enclave carved into a desert plain, where water rules were strict and aesthetics were treated as community values. The board rotated members every few years, but one presence stayed constant. The self-appointed enforcer, a neighbor everyone whispered about. Not a board member by title, but a fixture at meetings, clipboard always nearby, smile sharp enough to draw blood. I'll call her Ms. K. She lived 3 houses down, kept her hedges manicured to a ruler's edge, and had opinions about everything from mailbox fonts to driveway stains. She thrived on process, on pointing, on posting laminated notices on community boards with photos circled in red. When drought rules tightened, she adapted fast, memorizing the guidelines, and then finding ways to use them as weapons. The lawn color rule became her favorite. The rule itself lived in the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, a section most residents skimmed once and forgot. CCR Section 4.3 addressed landscape uniformity, including a color tolerance range meant to keep lawns from turning neon or patchy. It was supposed to prevent extremes. Instead, it created them. A narrow band of acceptable green, enforced by visual comparison and, when challenged, by a color card kept in a folder. The first time I saw the card was at a board agenda walkthrough posted on the website, an excerpt titled Landscape Compliance Procedures. The document included a date and a bullet point about inspection methodology. Evidence prop number 1, board agenda excerpt dated April 28th, outlining visual match to association-approved palette. It sounded official. It also sounded absurd. The drought complicated everything. We were encouraged to conserve, fined for overwatering, and now warned for undersaturating grass that faded a shade lighter than the card. Neighbors whispered at mailboxes, eyes flicking toward Ms. K's house. The sun glared off car hoods, and the smell of hot asphalt mixed with cut grass in the mornings. I tried to be proactive. I emailed the association, attached photos taken at permitted hours, and asked for clarification. The response came back generic, reminding me of the upcoming inspection window and the fine schedule. No guidance. No room for nuance. The clock kept ticking. Conflict didn't arrive as a bang. It crept in with small humiliations. A laminated flyer appeared on the community board titled Keeping Our Lawns Beautiful, with photos of compliant greens, and one photo that looked uncomfortably like my yard. No names were printed, but everyone knew. Cars slowed. Heads turned. Social pressure did what fines couldn't, and it stung more. The sensory details stick with me. The sun bleaching the grass by noon. The faint buzz of cicadas. The way the gate clicked shut behind me when I returned from work, sealing me into a place that suddenly felt hostile. I noticed Ms. K pacing with her phone, angling for shots. I noticed a security patrol slow near my curb, the crunch of gravel loud in the stillness. I received a courtesy warning next, stamped and dated May 5th. Evidence prop number 2. Courtesy warning dated May 5th, listing hue variance exceeding tolerance. Courtesy felt like a joke. The warning referenced the inspection scheduled for the coming weekend and the fine amount pending compliance. $1,200. The number sat heavy, an arbitrary punishment for photosynthesis under rationed water. I considered letting it go, receding, repainting my life in a color someone else chose. But the more I read, the more I realized the rules enforcement leaned on subjectivity. Visual match. Card comparison. No instrument. No allowance for light conditions or drought stress. It was power exercise because it could be. The deadline wasn't just a date. It was a test of who got to decide what good enough looked like, and whether a weekend inspection could rewrite my budget overnight. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, sun angles. I took photos at dawn and dusk, noting how the grass deepened when shadows fell. I saved the association emails. I printed the CCR section and highlighted the language about tolerance. Evidence prop number 3. CCR section 4.3 printout with highlighted clauses on acceptable variation. This wasn't about rebellion yet. It was about preparation. Neighbors began to share stories quietly. A patch cited here, a sprinkler adjustment flag there. No one wanted to be next on the board flyer. The social shame worked, and Ms. K knew it. She attended the next open meeting and, according to the posted minutes, praised community vigilance. The minutes read sterile, but the subtext was clear. I could feel the story tightening. The inspection loomed. The weekend was coming fast. And somewhere between drought rules and a color card, I realized compliance might not mean surrender, to be why the time the calendar flipped toward midweek, the pressure had shifted from annoyance to risk. The association posted a reminder about inspections, complete with a map of zones and time windows, and my address sat squarely in the first group. The desert heat seemed to intensify, as if reacting to the countdown. Lawns across the enclave shimmered in slightly different hues, none identical, all alive in their own way. Yet only some were targets. I noticed how enforcement clustered. Homes near Ms. K's walking route received warnings, others didn't. It wasn't random. It was proximity and visibility. I added that observation to my notes, not as an accusation, but as context. Power often hides behind patterns. I tried one more good faith step. I requested a reevaluation under different light conditions, citing the CCR language on tolerance and environmental factors. The reply was curt. Visual match would be determined during the scheduled inspection. No exceptions. No rescheduling. The committee thanked me for supporting community standards. The sensory details kept piling up. Sprinklers clicked off exactly on time. The dry air carrying the smell of wet soil for a brief, hopeful moment before it vanished. A lawnmower droned somewhere, then stopped. Silence followed, heavy and anticipatory. The first escalation came quietly. A neighbor forwarded me a photo from the community board's private page. It showed a row of lawns with colored boxes drawn beneath them, a crude gradient ranking from approved to non-compliant. Mine sat just over the line. No names again, but the implication was unmistakable. Community shaming had gone digital. I felt that familiar mix of anger and resolve. This wasn't about grass anymore. It was about control, about who got to wield the rules and who had to absorb them. I started researching the approved palette more deeply. The association referenced a supplier list, a handful of pigments used for seasonal touch-ups in common areas. Pigments. That word stuck. I found the invoice policy next, buried in a maintenance appendix. Any approved landscape material had to be documented. Receipts retained for audit. Evidence prop number 4. Maintenance appendix note requiring receipts for approved pigments. The rule existed to prevent fraud. It could also prove compliance. I wasn't plotting revenge yet. I was plotting survival. If the rule was color, and color could be documented, then money wasn't the only thing on the line. Proof was. Section 3 of this saga ends where Section 4 truly begins. The association didn't wait for the weekend to tighten the screws. A final notice appeared in my inbox, dated May 12th, reminding me of the inspection window and the fine schedule. Evidence prop number 5. Final notice dated May 12th, citing noncompliance continuation. The language shifted from advisory to punitive. Cure or pay. I walked the block that evening, the sky burning orange as the sun dropped. Lawns looked different in that light, richer, darker. I took photos again, time-stamped, framing the grass against known references. The desert wind picked up, rattling palm fronds and carrying dust across my shoes. Everything felt exposed. Escalation thrives on momentum, and the board had it. At the next posted agenda, Landscape Enforcement Review topped the list. Ms. K's name appeared in the acknowledgments for community assistance. The message was clear. She was empowered. Neighbors started choosing sides quietly. Some avoided eye contact. Others offered sympathetic nods. A few whispered encouragement, sharing their own fears of being next. The social fabric strained under the weight of a color chart. I attended the open portion of the meeting, sat in the back, and listened. The discussion was procedural, devoid of emotion on paper, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. Consistency, standards, values, words that sound noble until they're used to flatten nuance. The desert sun beat against the windows, casting harsh light across the room. I left with one certainty. If I did nothing, the fine would land. If I overwatered, I'd violate drought rules. The trap was elegant and cruel. The money was about to become real, and once fines start stacking, they rarely stop. The association sent out a community-wide email warning about continued violations and reminding residents that fines could escalate into liens. It wasn't addressed to me, but it felt personal. HOA fines gone wrong aren't just numbers, they're leverage. The threat of a lien turns a dispute into a financial chokehold. I revisited the pigment list. Approved colors had names and codes. I cross-referenced them with suppliers and availability. Some were marketed as eco-friendly tints used to refresh lawns without excess water. They were allowed. They were documented. They were expensive. The idea took shape slowly, not as spite, but as symmetry. If color was a standard, then color could be met exactly. Not approximated. Matched. I ordered the approved pigment, selecting the exact code referenced in the appendix. The invoice totaled $1,200, the same amount as the threatened fine. Evidence prop number 6. Supplier invoice totaling $1,200 for approved pigment code. I kept the receipt pristine, placed it in a folder with the CCR printout, the notices, the photos. Paperwork became armor. The application was careful, conservative, within guidelines. No excess water. No runoff. The grass shifted subtly, settling into a deeper, uniform green that matched the card under midday light. The desert air smelled faintly of mineral dye, then faded. The association enforced a narrow lawn color rule during a drought, escalating warnings into a $1,200 fine threat. I responded by documenting rules, sourcing approved pigments, and preparing proof for inspection day. Section 5 loomed, the retaliation phase, but for now, there was only waiting. The weekend inspection approached, and the neighborhood felt like it was holding its breath. Sprinklers clicked on and off in unison, a mechanical heartbeat. Cars rolled past slowly. Ms. K's phone was out again. Inspection day wasn't just about grass anymore. It was about whether preparation could turn their own rules back on them. I stood by my window as inspectors moved down the block, clipboards in hand. The sun was unforgiving, bleaching colors at the edges. When they reached my lawn, they paused longer than usual. One held the color card up, squinting. I could see the moment of uncertainty, the crack in the certainty that had powered weeks of pressure. I didn't step outside. I let the documentation speak later. For now, The silence was enough. The pause stretched longer than I expected. Inspectors moved on, and the street returned to its low hum, but the moment didn't pass. It lingered. I knew the process well enough by then to understand that silence meant review. Clipboards would be checked against notes. Photos would be compared. Paper would matter. Retaliation didn't mean yelling or confrontation. It meant procedure. I submitted my compliance packet that afternoon through the association portal. Receipts, photos, CCR excerpts. The supplier invoice totaling $1,200 sat right on top, the number impossible to ignore. Evidence prop number 7. Compliance submission timestamped the same day as inspection. The desert light softened toward evening, turning the lawn almost emerald. Wind brushed across the blades, a dry whisper that felt like relief. For the first time in weeks, I slept without running numbers in my head. If the board accepted my paperwork, the fine would vanish. If they rejected it, the fight would finally be public. The response didn't come quickly. Days passed. The association posted routine notices, maintenance updates, nothing about enforcement outcomes. Ms. K resumed her walks, but her pace slowed near my house. The phone stayed in her pocket more often. That told me more than any email. Behind the scenes, I learned that other homeowners had quietly followed my lead. Approved pigments were backordered. Receipts were being saved. The uniformity the board wanted was arriving, but not in the way they'd planned. The cost of strictness was spreading. This was no longer just HOA versus homeowner. It was an HOA revenge story unfolding through compliance, not rebellion. The official decision arrived late on a Thursday. The message was brief. Compliance confirmed. No fine assessed. Future inspections would continue under existing guidelines. No apology. No acknowledgement of the scramble it had caused. Just a quiet reversal. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Outside, the heat shimmered, and a lawn sprinkler clicked on somewhere down the block. The sound felt different now, less threatening. But the story didn't end there. Climax doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes arrives as a meeting agenda update. The next board agenda included an item titled Landscape Enforcement Review, Policy Clarification. The attached memo proposed widening the acceptable color range and adding objective measures. It cited resident feedback and cost concerns. Ms. K's name didn't appear this time. I attended that meeting too, sitting in the same back row. The discussion acknowledged the tension between drought rules and aesthetics. Words like flexibility and fairness appeared for the first time. The desert sun filtered through dusty windows, softer now, less harsh. The motion passed. I felt a pause settle in, a single breath after weeks of pressure, then release. Aftermath is quieter. The lawn stayed green, but so did others, each in slightly different shades that no longer mattered. The community board flyers stopped featuring photos. Enforcement emails softened. Ms. K still walked the block, but the clipboard was gone. The cost was real. The pigment wasn't cheap, and the stress lingered longer than the heat. But the $1,200 I spent replaced the $1,200 I might have owed, and it bought something harder to measure. Boundaries. Neighbors nodded more openly now. Conversations returned to weather and maintenance instead of warnings. The desert suburb felt livable again. I keep the folder anyway. Receipts fade, paper yellows, but documentation is memory. This was never about winning. It was about refusing to be quietly cornered by HOA ridiculous rules dressed up as values. In this homeowners association drama, preparation was the only leverage that worked. Tell me your HOA lawn or color rule horror in one line. Next time, I'll tell you about a mailbox mandate that spiraled into access denial, and a board vote nobody expected, the kind of neighbors from hell situation that starts small and ends with everything on the line.